The call came at 4:58 in the morning. I know the exact time because I'd been lying awake anyway, still wearing the same clothes from the reception. My feet hurt. My back hurt worse. There was still a faint smell of gardenias in my hair from the centerpieces at the wedding, and I was too tired to shower but too wired to sleep. 27 years of planning a life, raising a son alone, and watching him marry the woman he chose. It had all compressed itself into a single Saturday in September, and my body hadn't caught up with the idea that it was over now. My name is Carol Delaney. I'm 61 years old, and I live, or I used to live, in the same house in Dayton, Ohio, where I raised my son Marcus from the time he was 4. The number on my phone was my neighbor, Bill Thatcher. Bill's 73. He doesn't call past 9 at night unless something's wrong. So when his name lit up my screen at that hour, before I even answered, something cold settled into my chest. "Carol!" His voice was low, careful. "I'm standing on my porch right now. There's a moving truck in your driveway, and a woman, I think it's Marcus's wife. She's talking to some men in your front yard. I heard your alarm go off and then stop real fast." I sat straight up. "She what?" "She had a key, Carol. She let them in." I should explain something about that house. Marcus and I moved in when he was small, after his father left and left us with almost nothing. I worked double shifts at the radiology clinic for 11 years to pay off the mortgage. That house was mine, legally and entirely, in every way that mattered, and in every way the law recognized. But 8 months before the wedding, Marcus had come to me with something that felt, at the time, like a reasonable request. His fiancée, Natalie, had found an investment advisor who suggested that in order to protect the property from estate complications, his words, relayed through her words, I should add her name to the deed, just as a secondary holder, just to simplify things later. I was skeptical. I told him that. He looked at me the way adult children sometimes look at their parents. Not with cruelty, but with that particular exhaustion that says, "Please don't make this harder than it needs to be." He said Natalie only wanted to feel like she was truly becoming part of the family, that it was symbolic more than anything. I trusted my son. And because I trusted my son, I did something I cannot undo. I added Natalie Reyes Delaney to the deed of my home. I drove the 6 blocks from my sister's house, where I'd been staying the night of the wedding because Marcus and Natalie were using my place for an out-of-town family sleepover situation. And when I turned onto Millbrook Drive, I saw the truck. It was a real truck, not a U-Haul, a contracted moving company with a logo on the side. Men in gray shirts were carrying boxes in through my front door like it was an ordinary Tuesday. Natalie stood near the garage in a cream-colored blouse, scrolling her phone with one thumb, looking completely at ease. I parked crooked and got out. "What is happening right now?" My voice came out quieter than I expected. Sometimes real anger doesn't yell. Sometimes it just gets very, very still. Natalie looked up from her phone. There was no guilt on her face. That's the part that still gets me when I think about it. Just a kind of practiced calm, like she'd rehearsed this moment more than once. "Carol, I was hoping to have this handled before you got here." Handled. I repeated the word like it had a strange taste. "This is my house." "It's our house," she said. "My name is on the deed. I had my attorney review it last week. I'm a co-owner of record." The men kept working. One of them bumped a corner of my hallway table, the one my mother gave me, and kept moving without looking back. "Where is Marcus?" Something flickered across her face then, so fast I almost missed it. "He's tired. He's sleeping." "Call him." "Carol, call my son right now or I will." He didn't answer. Not her call, not mine. Not for 40 minutes. I stood in my own living room, watching strangers rearrange my furniture, and called Marcus 7 times. I watched them move the boxes of my mother's dishes into what I can only assume Natalie had already decided would become a home office. I watched a man in a gray shirt pick up a framed photo of Marcus at his high school graduation, The one where he's grinning so wide his eyes had disappeared, and set it face down on the floor to make shelf space. I picked it back up, held it against my chest. Natalie was on her phone in the kitchen. I could hear her talking to someone in a low, efficient voice, not arguing, coordinating. She was not a woman in the middle of a fight. She was a woman executing a plan. That's when it truly hit me. This wasn't impulsive. This was the morning after the wedding deliberately. After the legal name change. After the ceremony made her a Delaney on paper. She had timed it. Marcus finally called back at 7:15. I walked out onto my back porch to take it. The porch where he and I used to eat cereal on Saturday mornings when he was small, where I'd taught him to identify cloud types from a library book because he'd been obsessed with weather for 2 whole years before sports took over. Mom. His voice was rough with sleep, and under the roughness, something else, something careful. Tell me what I'm looking at, Marcus. A long pause. She talked to me about it. I thought it was going to be more gradual. I didn't know she was doing it today. But you knew. Silence. You knew she was going to do this. I knew she wanted to. Restructure things. She has a business idea, a short-term rental situation, and she wanted a home base here while we're between places. And, Mom, it's temporary. Stop. My hand was shaking around the phone. Not from weakness. From restraint. You let her put her name on my house. On my house that I paid for. And you knew she planned to use it. And you let me sign those papers and you said it was symbolic. It was complicated, and I should have explained it better, I know that. Come here, I said. Come to this house right now and look me in the eye and say that. He didn't come. My attorney's name is Diane Voorhees, and she's been practicing property law in Montgomery County for 22 years. I was in her office by 9 that Monday morning, still in clothes I'd slept in, with a folder of documents I'd photographed off my own kitchen table before Natalie could move them. Diane looked at everything, asked me a series of questions in a calm, non-judgmental tone, and then leaned back in her chair and folded her hands. You added her as a joint tenant with right of survivorship, she said. That's the most generous form of co-ownership. She has legal standing to occupy and use the property. Can she put strangers in it? Not without your consent, for commercial rental. That's your leverage. I looked at her. What else? Diane tapped her pen against the folder. You can file for partition, essentially force a legal division or sale of the property. Given that you paid the entire mortgage and can document that, a court will look at contribution history. The timeline of the deed change relative to the marriage is also notable. When exactly did you sign? 8 months before the wedding. And when did she begin discussing the rental business idea with your son? I didn't know. But I intended to find out. Here's what I found out because Marcus, to his partial credit, was not a complete stranger to guilt. He came to my sister Patricia's house 3 days after the wedding. He sat at Patricia's kitchen table with a cup of coffee he didn't drink and told me things in fragments, the way people confess when they're ashamed but still defensive. Natalie had been planning the short-term rental concept for over a year. She'd identified my property, its neighborhood, its proximity to the university hospital, its size, as the ideal setup. She'd been the one to suggest the deed addition. The investment advisor she'd cited? Her cousin, who held no actual license. Marcus had known all of it. Not everything, he claimed. Not the timeline of the move-in. Not the fact that it would happen the morning after the wedding. But the shape of it. The intention of it. She said you'd eventually understand, he told me, not meeting my eyes. She said once it was set up and generating income, you'd see it was good for all of us. I looked at my son. This person I had driven to every doctor's appointment and soccer practice and late-night study session. This person I had protected from his father's absence every single day of his childhood by simply refusing to be absent myself. And I tried to find the words for what I was feeling. I couldn't. So I said the truest, simple thing I knew. She used you to take from me, and you let her. That's what happened here. He didn't argue. That, at least, was something. The partition filing took 4 months. It wasn't clean, and it wasn't cheap. And there were 3 separate hearings where I sat across a conference table from Natalie and her attorney, watching her perform the role of reasonable co-owner who simply wanted what the law provided. But Diane had been right about the leverage. The rental business required permits. The permits required both owners' signatures. I didn't sign. The guests Natalie had already booked had to be refunded. The business model collapsed before it began, and the legal costs of pursuing it started adding up on her side in ways that I learned later she hadn't fully anticipated. More significantly, the court's review of the property's history, my sole mortgage payments for 21 years, the tax records, the documentation of the deed change relative to the marriage date, resulted in a partition settlement that gave me first right of buyout at assessed value. I bought her off my own deed. It was the most surreal check I've ever written. Marcus and I didn't speak for 5 months. That was the hardest part. Not the legal process, not the money, not even watching strangers try to carry my mother's dishes out of my kitchen. It was 5 months of his phone going to voicemail, 5 months of wondering whether I had lost my son to a scheme his wife had built around him like a set of walls he didn't yet know were walls. He called on a Thursday in February. It was raining. I was making soup. I left, he said. Just those 2 words first. Okay, I said. She's been talking to someone else for a long time. I found out about 2 months ago. I didn't call you because I was embarrassed and angry, and I didn't know what to say. I stirred the soup. Mom, I'm sorry. I don't know how to explain the position I put you in. I knew it wasn't right and I talked myself into it and I'm sorry. I know, I said. That's it? That's a lot, Marcus. That's enough to start with. He came for dinner that weekend. We didn't talk about Natalie, or the house, or the partition. We talked about everything else, the way you do when you're rebuilding something and you both agree, without saying it, to start with the foundation. The gardenias from the centerpieces are long gone. The house is quiet again, the way I like it. Bill Thatcher waves at me from his porch most mornings, and sometimes he shakes his head slightly, and I understand exactly what he means. I think about what I should have held on to and what I let go of too easily. I think about how trust, real trust, has to be built between people across time and honesty. Not signed away on a Tuesday afternoon because someone made it sound like love. I added a deadbolt to the front door. Both locks require my key. That might sound like a small thing. It isn't. Question for the audience. Have you ever trusted someone close to you, family or otherwise, and later realized they had been planning something behind your back the entire time? How did you find the strength to rebuild, or did you? Share your story below.